Welcome back. This is day one of human reproduction. So before the break, we talked about asexual reproduction. We talked about sexual reproduction, and now we're going to be talking about human reproduction and how that happens, what makes it possible. Today, we're specifically talking about the male reproductive system. So our aim today is how does the male reproductive system anatomy allow for reproduction? So when you see this word anatomy, we're just talking about structures. How do these structures of the male reproductive system allow reproduction to happen? Let's find out. So as always, you've got a do now. So go ahead and pause this video, answer questions 1 and 2, and press play when you're ready to go over them. All right, number 1. One function of the male reproductive system in mammals is to do what? The answer here was C, allow for the delivery of gametes needed for reproduction. So remember that when we see this word gametes, we're talking about sex cells. And in this case, we're talking about sperm. So the male reproductive system allows for the delivery of sperm needed for reproduction. All right, that leads us to number 2, which is a pretty similar question. The primary function of the human male reproductive system is to do what? The answer here was B, produce and transport gametes. Again, when we say gametes, we're talking about sperm here. So the male reproductive system is able to produce sperm and transport it and get it where it needs to go. All right. So today, the first thing we're going to do is read through a passage about the male reproductive system. And as we go through, I want you guys to highlight any important information, write down any connections you can make to what we already know, and then use that information to answer questions 1 through 5 on your paper. All right, follow along with me as we go through the male reproductive system. So the male reproductive system in humans has 3 main functions. First, to produce the male gametes or sperm cells. Second, to deposit the sperm cells it produces inside the female. And third, to provide a pathway for the removal of urine from the body. The sperm cell formation occurs in the 2 testes. The formation of sperm requires a temperature that is 2 degrees cooler than that of the rest of the body. The lower temperature occurs in the testes because they are not located within the body cavity. Instead, the testes are suspended in a sac called the scrotum. The scrotum is an adaptation that has evolved to increase the chances of producing healthy sperm. Inside the testes, cells undergo meiotic cell division that leads to formation of the gametes. Nowhere else in the male's body does meiotic cell division occur. Sperm cells are highly specialized cells that are able to move. Each sperm cell's function is to try and deliver a single set of chromosomes from the male to the egg cell in the female. All right, guys, using that information, go ahead and pause this video, answer questions 1 through 5, and press play when you're ready to review the answers. Okay, number 1, what are the 3 major functions of the male reproductive system? So hopefully you found these 3 functions in the very first paragraph that we read. Those 3 functions are to first produce the male gametes that we know as sperm, also to deposit those male gametes or those sperm inside the female reproductive tract, and then also to provide a pathway for the removal of urine. So all 3 of those functions are covered by the male reproductive system. Number 2, why are the testes located outside of the male body cavity? Well, this has to happen because optimum sperm production occurs at a temperature that's actually 2 degrees lower than that of our normal body temperature. So our normal internal body temperature is around 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit, but that's too hot for sperm to thrive or really survive even. So in order to prevent those sperm from dying off, the testes are located within the scrotum, which is actually outside the body cavity. This allows that cooler temperature and allows the sperm to survive and thrive. Number 3, why do the cells in the testes go through only meiotic cell division? So before break, we talked about the difference between mitosis and meiosis. Remember that meiosis produces 4 gametes, which are haploid and contain half the total number of chromosomes. So the reason that cells in the testes go through only meiotic cell division is because of their goal, okay? The goal of the sperm cell is to deliver a single set of chromosomes to the female gamete, which also has a haploid set. Remember when you see this word haploid, we can represent that as the letter N, which again just means it has half the total set of chromosomes. So in humans' case, it's 23. And the reason that both the egg and the sperm each have 23 chromosomes, or a haploid set, is that when those two fuse and come together, they're going to create a diploid zygote that has the full set of chromosomes. So in humans, that full 46. Right? Number 4, what is the function of the scrotum? So we touched on this earlier, but we need to know that the scrotum has a protective function. It's going to protect those sperm, and it acts as a climate control system for the testes. For normal sperm development, the testes must be at a temperature that is slightly cooler, around 2 degrees cooler than the normal body temperature. All right, and number 5, what sex hormone is produced in the testes? We've talked about this one before, but we need to know that that sex hormone is called testosterone. And this is a hormone that is necessary for proper physical development in males. And we'll talk about some functions of that in just a minute. All right, the next thing we're going to do is go over a model of the reproductive system in males that we need to be familiar with, okay? Now, if you are working on this document on Google Docs, you should be able to double click the text boxes that are on your paper, and it'll take you to the drawing section of Google Docs where you can type in your answer, okay? If you are writing on this as a PDF, continue as normal, just write on your paper how you always do. All right, now we are looking at the male reproductive system here, and we already know that one of the functions of the male reproductive system is to get rid of urine and make sure it has a pathway to leave the body. So the first structure I actually want us to point out is one that we've already talked about before, and that is the bladder. Now, this is not a new bladder. This is the same urinary bladder that we talked about with the excretory system. So its function here is to store urine until it is ready to be released. However, when it is ready to be released, it's going to travel through what we know as the urethra, and that is going to allow that urine to be excreted or released from the body. That urethra is actually contained within the structure that we know as the penis. But then where do the sperm come in? Well, we need to know that sperm are produced in the testes. You've got 2 testes, we've got one on either side. Now, these are also called the testicles. So testicles and testes are used pretty much interchangeably. You can use either word. So again, there are 2 testes. Sperm are produced there. And then after production, they're going to travel through these tubes that we see on either side. And those tubes are called the vas deferens, or the vas deferens. Sounds very, very German. But as soon as the sperm travels through those vas deferens, they're going to come in contact with these structures right here that are known as the seminal vesicles. Now, this word seminal kind of looks like the word semen, and that's not a coincidence. The seminal vesicles are what's responsible for pumping in the fluid component of semen into those sperm to allow them some mobility and allow them to move more freely. So the prostate is the next section that we need to, or the next structure we need to know, and that also helps with pumping in fluid, just not as much. So the seminal vesicle pumps in more fluid than the prostate, but they both work together to give the semen that fluid structure, and again, allow those sperm a little bit more mobility when it comes time to leave the body. All right, and then the last pathway that the sperm is going to travel is as soon as that semen is pumped in, they are going to leave again through the urethra. So that urethra is in charge of excreting not only urine, but also sperm. So below this diagram, you'll see the pathway of the sperm. Make sure you are familiar with this pathway and how sperm leaves the body, because you will probably see it again. But I'm going to mark this on your diagram. Let's do it in red. All right, so again, the sperm are produced in the testicles or the testes. They're then going to travel through the vas deferens, again on either side. And then they're going to come in contact with these structures known as the seminal vesicles. The seminal vesicles are responsible for pumping that fluid into the semen, or I'm sorry, into the sperm. And then eventually that semen is going to leave through the urethra. All right, make sure you know that pathway, guys. You will see it again. Okay, now we've got 2 more things to go over today. First, we're gonna review testosterone, and then we're gonna look at the structure of sperm. So we've talked about testosterone before, but we need to make sure we know that this is the primary male sex hormone. It is also produced in the testes alongside the sperm. Its levels rise during puberty, and it is what's responsible for secondary sex characteristics. So things like facial hair, deeper voice, developed muscles, all those characteristics that arise during puberty in guys is responsible or are responsible, let me try that again, are due to the production of testosterone. Testosterone is responsible for those characteristics. There we go. All right. Now, the last thing we're going to talk about today is the structure of sperm. So the first thing you need to know about sperm is that the nucleus is contained in this front structure known as the head. Right, so the head is the first thing that comes in contact with the egg. If you want a fun fact, this acrosome right here, you guys don't really need to know that, but it basically burrows itself into the egg. It like digs a hole, physically digs a hole in the egg. It's kind of violent. But then the nucleus of that head of the sperm is going to fuse with the nucleus of the egg cell, and that's what allows fertilization to happen. But make sure you know that the nucleus is contained within the head of the sperm. Now, the next part of the sperm is covered with a ton of mitochondria. So all of these structures that we see right here are actually mitochondria. Now, I'm not going to tell you why they're there. I want you to figure that out. And we'll talk about that more on the next slide, but why are there so many mitochondria? Be thinking. And the last part of the sperm that we need to know is the tail. So in this GIF that you can see on your screen, the sperm is moving. It's basically swimming, and the tail is what allows that to happen. So it's going to whip constantly and allow that sperm to move, eventually traveling throughout the female reproductive tract, because it's got quite some ground to cover, which we'll talk about tomorrow. All right, so make sure you know those parts of the sperm. Now, I mentioned that there are a ton of mitochondria, and I also told you I'm not going to tell you why, and that's because I want you to figure it out. So right now, stop and think. The human sperm cell has a very powerful tail, and its midpiece is packed full of mitochondria. Now, why would a typical sperm cell need such a powerful tail and a lot of mitochondria? I don't know. So I'll give you a hint. Think about what is the primary function of the sperm cell and what is the job of mitochondria? I don't know. All right, guys, make sure you answer this question on your paper and I will reveal the answer to you tomorrow, although I'm pretty confident you can figure it out. As soon as you've done that, make sure you answer your exit ticket questions, submit this document, and have a wonderful afternoon. I'll see you guys tomorrow.